So of course, online learning is a very broad topic, and we are focusing in the main today on one aspect, and that is assessment and feedback. So our aims really are to raise awareness of the ways that assessment and feedback can be enhanced by carefully choosing formative assessment approaches and using effective and timely feedback. So we hope that the webinars will, or that this webinar I should say, will help particularly teachers who have already started sharing content, teaching online, setting assignments and tasks, and wish to move forward perhaps to the more in-depth use of assessment and the features within G Suite and others that can be integrated with the G Suite tools to provide feedback and that is effective and timely. So just to say that alongside these showcase webinars, we are also running training as well, and we have some support materials available also. So I'm just going to put up some slides here very briefly before we introduce our speakers today. So we have been running in our localities, Donna, Eamon and myself, a series of short webinars for G Suite and other tools. The G Suite ones will be around 30 to 45 minutes, focusing in on introduction to Google Drive, introduction to Google Classroom, and setting up your content and assessment in Google Classroom, with more advanced training planned as well for August and the new academic year. But the videos that are based alongside on the content really of the webinars are available in the G Suite support site, and that site link is there, and I'll be giving it to you later on as well, and it's also available through My School. Just to mention a little bit of support documentation, long awaited documentation perhaps, that is coming your way. So just today, I believe, there was a further circular issued by the Department of Education, and also this one a short time ago with regards to feedback. And well, feedback was one element of it, but it was regards to remote learning. The one that came out today, I understand, is focusing on curriculum planning for the new year. And this link will be available in the links that I'll be sharing with you in the takeaway sheet towards the end of the webinar. The context really for today's webinar and for each of the webinars really is the Learning Leader strategy provided by the Department of Education. And we trust that today and each of the webinars will fit with the key principles that you see outlined there. Some further documentation that I'd like to draw your attention to: the Continuity of Learning Group, which involves a lot of the support organisations, has produced a number of documents that you may have seen recently. One of them is devoted to the topic of feedback and assessment, and again I'll be providing that link, as well as to one focused on guidelines for online use of online technology produced by EA. Also, we'll be signposting you towards a very useful document by one of our presenters today, a virtual learning support by Alistair, Hamill. So all of these links will be in a little takeaway sheet, and I'll pop the link to that in the chat as we go towards the end of the session. So we are going to now hear from our speakers as they introduce themselves to you, and then we'll be starting with the main part of our webinar today. So if we could pass over to Alistair, please, to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello, Esther. Thanks very much for the introduction. Just a very brief introduction to me. My name is Alistair Hamill. I'm Senior Leader in Lurgan College, and I'm responsible there for teaching and learning and staff development. But I'm also Head of Geography there, which means that I'm still very much spending my day-to-day time in the classroom thinking a lot about pedagogy and technology. I love technology. I love pedagogy more, and I'm going to be talking about the relationship between those two and how to use technology effectively with the pedagogical goals in mind.
Thank you. And over to Ashlene.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ashlene Magee, and I teach in St John the Baptist College in Portadown. I'm a senior leader there and in charge of ICT and online learning, and I also teach history and English. And today I'll be talking to you about some of the strategies that we have used over the last 3 months to give effective feedback using the G Suite tools.
Thanks, Ashlene and Danielle.
Hello, my name is Danielle McKernan, and I'm responsible for digital learning at St Patrick's Academy in Dungannon. We're a large grammar school in County Tyrone with approximately 1,300 pupils and 80 staff. And in my role, I advise on the strategic direction of ICT. I help evaluate the tools against pedagogy. And along with the digital leaders in our school, I help build staff competency through training sessions and also through staff sharing good practice.
Super, thank you one and all. And I think online learning was definitely not new to any of our presenters prior to March of this year. And I think they're very, very well placed to reflect on the past few months and also to look forward to the transition to perhaps more blended learning. Their experience of effective use of technology over, as I say, many years is extremely valuable, not only within their own classes, but as learning leaders within their own schools. And we're delighted to be able to share that with you today. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over then to Alistair. I'll just get your slides up here now. Thank you. Just a slight delay in the system here, but we're nearly there.
Okay, thank you very much, Esther. Esther asked me to look at this from the point of view of leadership of learning through the digital environment. So this is pitched, I suppose, to any of you along today who are involved in that, any kind of middle or senior leadership role. But just to get right on message at the start, the Education Authority document calls us all learning leaders. And I really strongly believe that as we think about our pedagogy and our practice moving forward, that if we think about it on this strategic level and trying to understand why, it very much helps to make the practice that we do more effective. So hopefully you'll find something of use to all of you to get you to reflect a little bit more on what has been going on and what's coming next. Being a geography teacher, I need to start off with a little bit of a geography lesson. I'm very frustrated that I don't get to talk about this as much as normal, so I'm going to inflict some geography on you. You're all very aware of that saying, I'm sure, that a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think what we're going through at the moment is the fastest, most extensive, most rapid upskilling in IT competency and use, not only in Northern Ireland, but across the world. And I do really believe that by the time we finish this, we do have an opportunity to have a new level, a new baseline set up. We can be, as a whole, as a profession, better at this as a result of what's gone on. But of course, that lovely cam image is not really good illustration of what has actually happened recently, because it feels much more like a tsunami wave has come in. Yes, we have been lifted up, but the boats haven't been gently lifted up. This came as a surprise. It came without a huge amount of time for us to prepare, and for many of us, if we're being honest, it's just a case of trying to keep our heads above water at the moment, never mind reflecting on how we're going to improve and move forward. So what I really want to do today is to give you a few things that will maybe help you, maybe life buoyancy aids if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by this wave that's coming in, that's just really going to help and support your thinking and reflection as we move forward. And I'm going to do that over three different time scales. We're going to look back over the last few months at what we've been doing for the distance learning. We're going to look ahead to the 24th of August with that blended learning model, which is going to be different from what we've done over the last few months. And then we're going to finish off by imagining ahead. We're going to think ahead to what might be the case as we come out the other side of this. So there we are, 16th of March in our school. We had a school development day set, and on the Friday morning, we as an SLT decided that we needed to completely reinvent the training that we're going to be doing because we sensed the tsunami wave was coming. And we got the staff together and tried to train them a little bit on how we would respond to this. And at that time, I said to them that there were three types of knowledges that I think are important and helpful in getting you to reflect ahead in terms of how to make the best of this situation. And the first one is where you should always start with any ICT use, whatever the circumstances. We start with the pedagogical goal. What is it that we want our students to be able to know, understand, or do? Get the pedagogy first. But very often what happens then after that is that we move on to what I would call the know-how or the procedural knowledge. Okay, so I've got my pedagogical goal, so how do I do this using technology? Now, if you're here today and maybe you would say to yourself that you're maybe not as proficient in IT as some other members of staff that you see, this can maybe be a bit of a barrier to you sometimes, because whenever you run into the procedural knowledge, the know-how, and the learning curve sometimes can be very, very steep, and sometimes it can be very difficult. And if we're being honest, there may be some people here who are just saying, look, get me back to normal, please, as quickly as possible so I can put all of this technology out of the way and do what I know. And listen, I understand that. These are unprecedented times, difficult times, and they're overwhelming. But I want to suggest that there's another type of knowledge that it might be useful for you to focus on, something that maybe empowers you a little bit more. And that is what I would call functional knowledge, or know. And it goes something like this. You get your pedagogical goals clear in your mind, what it is that you want your students to know, understand, and be able to do. And then you come to the technology and ask one of the most important questions. What can I reasonably expect the technology to help me with to reach those goals? I think that's a vital question to ask, because that's where you then start to get the dialogue between your pedagogical goals and your functional knowledge. Let me show you a little analogy. If you've been upskilling yourself during lockdown, I'm not a particularly good cook, but at lunchtime, seeing as I'm at home, I've decided I'm going to try and cook a little bit more and learn how to do it. Now, whenever I'm doing something like this, I need to go through step by step. I need to follow the recipe very, very carefully. And sometimes I can get lost in the detail and I can feel like I've left an important step out, or I've used an ingredient in the wrong way. And sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. But of course, the people that design these recipe cards are very clever, because you turn over the other side and they show you the outcome. They show you what you can reasonably expect to be able to make from this. And to me, then, this is the know-how, is like the first slide I showed you. Those are the step-by-step guides. But in approaching technology as well, you need to know what. What can you reasonably expect it to do? Because that's then why it helps to motivate you as to why you would stick with it whenever you're moving forward. So to our three areas then, as we're looking at these different time scales, we're starting with in terms of what's happened over the last few months. And in particular, I wanted to reflect for a few minutes today on assessment for learning, AFL in the distance environment. How do we know what they know? I mean, we'll all know the difference in our classes between standing at the front and telling the people some information and then figuring out if they've actually received it and understood it. In a classroom setting, there's lots of things that we can do to help our students with that, and help us to discern the extent to which they're learning through questioning technique, through giving them challenging questions and see how they get on, and all sorts of things like this. But it's more difficult in the learning environment. If I was standing in the room with you right now, I'd be able to read the body language. I'd be able to maybe even ask some questions. At the moment, I'm staring at a computer screen and have no idea if you're all still here or you've cleared off somewhere. So how can we, in this kind of environment, interact with our students? How do we know that they know? Well, I'm going to show you an example from some of the A-level teaching that I've been doing with the Year 13s. We've started the A course and we're working with them on coasts. I had produced some videos for them that will help and support them in their learning, and they were watching those videos. But watching videos isn't necessarily the students knowing and learning. So how then could I get my students to use that information in such a way that I could see it? That's my pedagogical goal. I want to see them use and apply the information. So how can I do that? Well, the procedural knowledge we're not really dealing with today. For me, it's more that functional knowledge, because I know that Google Slides and Google Docs allow you to share them and use them collaboratively, and you can see students working on them in a live setting. So what if I were to set up something like this in Google Slides? And you can see here the yellow boxes, which were there. They had their students' names beside each of them. And I used that at the start of the lesson for some retrieval practice. I started off this virtual lesson and video conference lesson with them by asking them some questions. I was able to see them type in their answers. I was able to see how quickly they were able to type, which told me a lot. I was also able to see how well they were able to develop their answers, and then I was able to do some question and answering based on that. The rest of the white slides, those were all copied and pasted, similar slides, and each of them was a support for the students as they did some tasks. And again, because I was able to watch them live, I was able to give some feedback to them. I was able to double click on the slide and go in and see what they were writing. I was able to type a comment in, or I could look at the slide view like this and get the overview with the students and see how they're getting on. So that was my pedagogical goal. How do I know that they know? This is the functional knowledge. I know that they can collaboratively work on this slides document, and I can watch it and see them using it live. So what about thinking ahead though to August and September and beyond? What about this blended learning that's approaching? Well, what I want to say first of all is a little analogy for this one. There's a lot that we don't know about what August and September are going to look like. And I'm sure you know this little illustration. If you've got sand and pebbles to put in a jar, don't put the sand in first, because if you put the sand in first, you can't fit the pebbles in. You put the pebbles in first, and then you put the sand in, and that's what's going to help. So my planning at the moment with our school is very much saying, right, what are some of these big pebbles? What are some of the big principles that we can get in mind and we can plan for now? Because the sands will shift, the details may change. So one of the ones in particular was this issue here of getting students to engage. Certainly one of the things I'm quite sure that has been your experience is the difficulty of getting all the students to engage with the online work. As we go to a blended model, we're going to see them more often, and hopefully we can encourage them to engage, but they're still going to be at home, working at home. So how can we train and help our pupils with that? So I was thinking of 3 pedagogical pebbles that we can put in place for this. And this is very much thinking of what we can equip and train our pupils to do as we move forward. And again, is to get for them the idea of the importance of learning. One. Now, they will need some tech skills, of course. Hopefully by now, many of them have picked up how to use the likes of Google Classroom, but they might need some upskilling in that one. But the other thing that I think is very important that we train our students moving forward with is this whole notion of their dispositions, their metacognition, their ability to manage their own learning, because I think that has been a major block for many of them. I'll share afterwards this link to this video by Alex Quigley, which I came across the other day. It's extremely helpful. What he does is goes through there and talks about exactly that kind of thing, of the upskilling that our students need to engage in. So whenever you're meeting your students again, when you see them face to face, yes, there may be some technological needs that they have to be upskilled on, but think about that as well in terms of the metacognition, the dispositions, how they would manage their own learning. That's a very, very good resource to help you with that. So what about looking ahead? What about our future? What about our reimagined learning with this? Esther, you were referring to the DE document that came out this morning. I managed to have a quick scan through it, and it says this: schools may wish to reflect on how their school vision may be adapted or changed to develop an effective vision for blended learning. It is envisaged that greater use of online learning will continue post-pandemic, with integration of information technology in education being further accelerated by recent events. In other words, they're looking for us to consider about how we might reimagine this future, how we might learn from this. So let me give you one particular example of this, and I'm going to encourage you to think about one thing based on your experience over the last few months that you could change. An assessment tool we make very extensive use of is Google Forms, and we used this a lot and did before we went into lockdown over the last couple of years, and multiple choice questions that we would set for our end of topic tests. And now the way that we design these questions is not to make them just simple recall. They have to use the information. That's crucial in the design because we want to make sure that they're testing understanding and not just knowledge. So for this question in particular, it shows a synoptic chart for depression. At which letter would you find heavy rain? What they have to do is to remember from their heads where in a depression you find heavy rain. They have to then match that up to this synoptic chart and picture it, and then they have to apply it to this particular case. This is something that is more than just simply recalling their knowledge. Here's another example of one here where they're given a slide of a weather forecast, and they're given a series of descriptions of the weather and the best forecasts of the weather. They're similar but with some tweaks in there, and those students then really have to read them carefully, have to read the map, apply the statements to the map. I wanted to show you those because I wanted you to see how these are not just designed to test simple recall knowledge, but they really can test the application of that knowledge. Now, one thing am I going to change. Before lockdown, we would have got the students to do these in test conditions in school because, well, it's a test. How do I know they're not using their books? And then we go into lockdown, we've still got all of these quizzes that we can use with them, and we encourage them not to use their notes, but how do we know? Well, I decided that I would totally lean into this. And I decided that I would give the students, this is the year 11 class track and grid here, for instance, I would give them as many goes to repeat this test as they wanted to. I encouraged them not to use their books, but I was give them as many goes as possible. Now, from their point of view, they were thinking this was great because they were thinking they were able to get the highest scores they possibly could. From my point of view, I was thinking this was great because I was getting them to think about geography over and over and over again. Now, you can see here in the comment that I've selected there, I did put the total score in for them, but I did put in as a little comment what the first score was that they got. And in this case, this student got 16 out of 24 in the first go, which is good. It's good. But she was determined to keep going until she got full marks. And have a go at that. I got her to think about geography 8 times longer than she would otherwise have done if we had just let them do the test once. So when I'm moving forward, I'm thinking, do I really want to use my precious contact time with the students in front of me where they sit in silence for a period in a room and do a test? Or because I'm designing these questions here in such a way as they do test understanding and not just knowledge, can I get them to do this at home? Can I say to them, have as many goals as you want? Can I get them to spend much, much longer thinking about geography than they otherwise would? Is that a way of reimagining the future? So what one thing could you change? Think back over the last few months. Think back of the steep learning curve that you've had, of the challenges that you've had to meet and how you've risen to those challenges. Things are you learning that you could take forward? And maybe it is just one thing to start, but maybe it is to consider and think more deeply about how we might redesign this. The tide has risen. The tide might go back out again, but wouldn't it be great to think that through all of this awful experience that we're having here can be redeemed? Wouldn't it be great to think that actually the tide would remain higher and we would be upskilled as a result of that? Wouldn't it be great to think of how we can move forward and progress our ICT use for the pedagogical purposes as a profession? And the good news is the decision in that is entirely in our own hands. This is up to us to reflect on, and we can choose to make those changes. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you very much, Alistair. I think you've given us a lot there. And folks, you'll be glad to know that those slides will all be available to you. All the slides from today will be available to you at the end. And thank you so much, Alistair, for placing today really in the pedagogical context of not only online learning, but the prospect of the transition to blended learning. We're very grateful to you indeed. So at the end, we hope to pick up on the audience's thoughts and queries and experiences on all of what we're discussing today. So be looking forward to hearing from everyone at that point. So if we could pass over now to Ashlene Magee from St. John the Baptist. Thank you.
All right, so hello everybody again. So as I said, I work for St. John the Baptist College in Portadown, we were the ICT Excellence Award winners last year. And so we were in a position where we have been using G Suite for a good number of years, and were kind of well placed when the pandemic happened to continue our journey into online learning. That's not to say there wasn't an awful lot of kind of scrabbling for a lot of teacher sessions of training. There was a lot of that kind of going on, because as with every job, there are people who are more confident in ICT than others, and so there was a lot of upskilling needed, both for ourselves and for our pupils. But just a bit of background about kind of our journey, because we're all on an ICT journey in terms of teaching. We decided, our school opened in 2017, and from the very start we decided on G Suite as opposed to Office 365, and that was mainly to do with Google Drive. It was a very simple kind of interface where we could collaborate and store all of our documentation, and we piloted that at the very beginning with just our staff and our board of governors, who use it as well to store all of their documentation and collaborate on it. And that then, over the last number of years, has filtered down then to the children. The fact that you can access anything, anywhere, that it was a very simple interface. So teachers who weren't very technologically savvy, it wasn't kind of intimidating or scary for them. They were quite happy to give it a go. And then the fact that Google Classroom existed was a big selling point for us, because we knew that was the way we kind of wanted to go. We wanted to go towards a more online blended learning model even back then. So when the pandemic happened, we were already using Google Classroom in a number of departments. It had been trialled, and so we were familiar with the way that assessment could be carried out in an online platform. So G Suite, the documents themselves, your Google Docs, your Google Slides, your Google Forms, and all the rest of it, all allow you to create and collaborate. You can have children working in groups on a particular slide document. You can have them working in as a whole class on a document if you want, although it doesn't always work very well. Google Forms, which is brilliant for little self-assessment quizzes, and even just a handy way of giving feedback, which I'll go into later on. And then it opened up this whole world of video and audio assessment as well. Because we have iPads and Chromebooks and all that kind of technology, or the children have smartphones in their pockets, the ability to create video and audio is something we carry around every day. So that was a new way of assessment for us that we really, really wanted to kind of capitalize on. So that then leads on to feedback. You know, once we've assessed, we need to give feedback, and we have had a drive in school for the last number of years about giving really good, meaningful feedback. That's not just a comment at the bottom of the page, but that the pupils are actually engaging in a dialogue with us about their work and starting to think about how they can get better. So in G Suite, there are a number of ways that we give feedback. There's the comments, there's audio, and there's video, and there's rubrics, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. So at its most basic level, you have your comment function, and no matter sort of what stage of your G Suite journey you're at, you're probably familiar with the private comment box. So what we found over the last number of months it has allowed us to do is have an instant dialogue with the pupils. You know, it's on my iPad. The Google Classroom app is there. As soon as a child posts a comment, I get a little notification. So if I'm sitting in front of my computer, I know that someone needs help, basically. And it allowed us to have these conversations with the pupils about their work. They were asking for help. They were thinking about what they needed to do. They were taking advice, and they were then applying it to what the task was. And at the end, then, at its most basic level, whenever you're marking a piece of work, it was a place for summative feedback that you could put in that kind of little sentence about how well they'd done. But it was just that it was that dialogue that was kind of the most important part, that it was getting them to think about their learning. And we'd even find prior to this, when using G Suite in the classroom, that the very, very quiet children who don't, as much as we encourage them to, don't want to speak out in class and ask questions, would actually, even while sitting in front of you in a classroom, message you on Google Classroom and ask a question. But it gave them the confidence to do that, to ask a question that they otherwise wouldn't have, that they would have went home and tried the work anyway without getting the help. But allowed us to kind of go down and speak quietly to them, or even to respond via the kind of the message box if they wanted to. So the pupils feel very confident in responding in the private message box, and that was one of the biggest things that we found about it. Moving on from that, then you have the live comments, which is a fabulous feature because everything in G Suite is all online. As Alistair said before, you can see the children basically kind of typing on their work. You can see them doing the work there. Then what the live comments allowed us to do was, say a child had messaged you a private comment saying they needed help, you could nip onto their little document and you can start to comment down the side of it. And every little comment that you make is highlighted, and any changes you make to the document is kind of outlined in green as well. And one of the best things about this is the little resolve button that appears beside each comment. It makes the children go and look at those comments because they get a little notification to say that you've commented. And if they want it to disappear, then they have to change it and they have to resolve it. So that, again, is getting them looking at the feedback and thinking about the suggestions that you've made, rather than you handing a written book, an exercise book back, and then just glancing at the grade and maybe never reading the comment that you've written at the bottom. This is forcing them to take the feedback on board. What we found with that is that it has increased that engagement with feedback. The children will go and read it, they will resolve it, they will go and make the changes, and that then leads to a better quality of work. It also allows us to provide ongoing feedback, so it's not just about waiting until the piece is finished and then giving the feedback at the end. If the pupil needs help or assistance in between, then you can go and you can give that help. Or even if you're just kind of having a little glance at your class and you notice that someone's gone maybe just a little bit wrong, you can put the little comment in there. From a teacher kind of a time-saving point of view, which, you know, we could all spend hours of our lives marking, there's a bank of comments. You can build up your own bank of comments in Google Classroom, which then just you copy and paste across, so it saves you having to type as well. If you're kind of, you know, same sort of similar things in your subject, there'll be different comments that you'll want to keep in your little comment bank, so it saves a bit of time as well. If you're using an iPad or a tablet, then you also have a markup function which creates like a PDF of the document that the child has created. If you have a really good stylus, you can then just write on it as if you would with a normal pen and paper. So maybe for essay type questions and stuff like that, that's really good. And you can see some examples there of just work where, particularly at home, because we had pupils who, you know, were using maybe mobile phones because they didn't have another device in the house. They were having to write out their work on a page and then take a photograph of it, which is difficult to mark, and you don't want to be given just that summative comment all the time. You want it to be a bit more meaningful. You want to highlight the spelling errors and all the rest of it. So the markup function is fantastic for that. And you can see just how in-depth and detailed you can go into it, and it is literally just like writing on a piece of paper. If you have a particularly good stylus and they're not difficult to pick up. This one's a bit silly, but the children do love it. It's a Bitmoji sticker. So Bitmoji, if you don't know what it is like a little avatar of yourself. There's an app for the iPad and your phones that you can get, and you can create the avatar on there. And there's also a Chrome extension. So the Chrome extension sits up at the top of your Chrome browser, and when you click on it, it brings up a variety of different versions of you, and they're brilliant just for using as stickers. So like our traditional little stampers or little great good work stickers that you would use in the pupils' exercise books, which can be silly at post-primary, but the children do still love it and they respond to it. You can slot those into any kind of Google Doc. And so you can see here, you know, it's just a matter of hitting the Chrome extension at the top of the page and dragging it in. And it also, you can add your own text to them as well. So if you find that there's a comment that you want to make that there isn't an actual sticker for, you can type it into the little search box in the Chrome extension, and it will add it to what it thinks are maybe appropriate little stickers that you can use. And we've had some really good feedback from the children in terms of that, because they use Bitmojis in their Snapchat and their social media. So the fact that teachers are using them too, they think is great, and they love seeing them. I'm going to mention a little bit about Google Forms. I know Danielle's going to speak about it later on, but Google Forms is brilliant for little quizzes and end-of-topic tests. Even if you're not doing multiple choice questions, it's brilliant for giving individual feedback. So I teach history, and you can see in the background, it's not very clear, but I've got one of my kind of assignments that I would have set one of my year 10 classes. And I ask the question then has a box underneath it that they can type their answer into. When I go then to mark all of those assignments that the Year 10s have done, I can mark by question, and I can add individual feedback to questions. And not only can I type in my feedback, but I can also add in a link, or I can add in a YouTube video. So I can link them to maybe some notes that would help them to understand the topic better if they haven't understood the question properly. Or if they've understood it really well and I feel that I can stretch and challenge them a little bit more, I could link in a document or a video that would take them onto another piece of learning, another assignment that they could do outside of just what I set them in class, so that you're kind of feeding into that the gifted and talented area, and you're stretching them on. You're always trying to get them to push themselves and learn outside of the classroom. Because one of the things that's been brilliant about the past 3 or 4 months is the children can go on their own learning journey. They can go onto YouTube and they can watch videos about different things and different topics that they're learning about in class, and are maybe more likely to when they're sitting in front of a computer, and you're able to guide them in that way by giving them the video links that can then lead them on to other things. So the comments, that's kind of feedback at its most basic level. Then taking it up a notch, we have audio feedback. And we know we've surveyed our pupils and our parents, after just a few weeks ago at the end of the whole online learning process. And audio and video are the two that they've responded best to. They love to hear voices, they love to see teachers, and that was what they got the most out of. So what we have used for audio feedback is a website called Vockaroo. And you go onto the website, you record your feedback, and then it gives you a little link that you can then copy and paste into the private comments box on Google Classroom. And the children don't need any additional software downloaded to their own devices in order to listen to it, which can be an issue with some Chrome extensions that allow audio feedback. And it's just a really, really simple and easy way of doing it. And you can see, down here, I've just got one of the teachers who's copied and pasted a link. She has it saved in her Google Drive there. The Modern Languages department has found this really, really effective, because they're able then to pronounce words for pupils, or phrases or sentences or whatever it is, and pupils then can listen to it in their own time. It's not a one-off conversation in class. They can go back and they can refer back to it at whatever time they need, and they can take the time to process it. Video feedback then, there's a variety of ways of doing this. This is my favourite form of feedback I found over the last couple of weeks. Screencastify is the one that I have used the most. It's a free website. It has its own Chrome extension. You hit the Chrome extension and it will start to film the browser window that you are working in. And it just enabled me to give really, really quick, detailed feedback to the pupils. You can have yourself in the bottom corner, which, going by pupil and parent feedback, they really, really appreciate and love. They'd like to see in teachers. And it was, again, a way to give feedback, but that pupils could take in little bits. So if you were going through, say, an essay question, they could go through it and just watch a bit about the first paragraph and take that in, go make the changes, and then go back and refer back. So you weren't just giving them that one-off conversation in class where they listen to you, but they're not taking it all in. And it really did kind of benefit them. It made their work much more meaningful. It made it better. Some other options, if you're interested in video feedback, is Screencast-O-Matic and Loom. And I see their question. No, Screencastify is only 5 minutes. You're limited to it. They were doing, I think their educational license is something like $29 or £29 a year. I found for giving feedback, the 5 minute limit was fine. If I did need to give any more, then I would have used my iPad. So you can see down the middle picture, down at the bottom of the screen, is me using the iPad in split screen. So on one side of it, I have Keynote open with the camera function selected. And then on the other side, I have my Google Slides or whatever piece of work it was that the children were using. And I would film, I would screen record that. If, say, a child had really, really misunderstood maybe the topic or the assignment and needed some really, really in-depth explanation to it, then I would do it that way. Another really great app for this is Explain Everything. Maybe not necessarily for feedback, but if you are doing like little instruction videos or showing pupils how to complete an assignment, the educational version is $13.99, but is absolutely brilliant. It records every single mark you make on a page, so you can annotate a piece and it will film it all, and you can have your voice recorded over the top of it. So those are just some of the options. Screencastify, as I said, was enough for us. But if you are going to record more than 5 minutes, then there is the option to purchase the license, or I think Loom is actually free and doesn't have a limit. The way Screencastify works is it just gives you, it saves directly to your Google Drive, first of all, but it also gives you a little shareable link, and you can just copy and paste that then into the comments box for the pupils. And again, they don't need any additional software in order to watch it, and it's there for them, and it's immediate. So the last thing I'm going to talk about are rubrics. This was quite a new feature to Google Classroom and only kind of came online, I think, sort of early this year. I've been using rubrics for a little while. I use Idosio as a teacher planner, and it has a rubrics function. So the fact that I was then able to kind of embed these into Google Classroom was brilliant. This one is a very basic one, it's just our little homework code that we use. You basically go in and you create your rubric, so you decide on your score, on your points, and what the feedback would be for the pupil. And over at the right hand side of the screen, you can see then what that looks like when you go to mark a piece of work. So when you're marking a child's piece of work, over at the side of the screen, you'll see the little box where you put in the mark, and below that, if there's a rubric attached, you'll see the rubric. And the 5 little shaded boxes underneath that, you hit one of those, and that then automatically updates the mark. So if I wanted to give the child 3 out of 5, I'd hit the middle box, and that then updates their mark box. The child can see the rubric, so they get a copy of it attached with their assignment, so they know then that that's what they need to do in order to get whatever score it is that they want to achieve. And then whenever you send that, when you return that assignment to them, the rubric is there then, and they can see that that was the score that they got, so they can look beyond that, so to points 4 and points 5, and say, right, well, that's what I need to do better next time. Or they can kind of say something maybe a bit more detailed like this. So this would be one for a media text analysis for English. This one is created using Idosio, but it can be exported as an Excel worksheet and then imported into Google Classroom, so you don't need to go kind of reinventing the wheel with that one. But it's a really, really easy way of giving the children really detailed feedback without having to kind of either copy and paste it in or type it up every single time. And especially when they get used to using them, then they know then to look up the sort of next score above, and they know, right, that's what I need to do next time in order to achieve a better mark. And they're just really, really handy. So that's some of the strategies that we have used over the last kind of 3 months. Looking forward with G Suite, just a couple of things that I just want to mention that we're kind of moving on to that are really, really good. So Google Sites is something that we're looking at using an awful lot next year. At the minute, I'm using them to organise my schemes of work and all of my resources, because Google Drive can be a bit messy, you know, everything's in folders and it's fine. But a Google Site, you can put in links to any Google in your Google Drive, and it means then that I can pass that on to other members of the department or substitute teachers, and everything is there for them. We also created a transition information site for our P7 pupils and parents, so that all the information they needed was there, because we didn't get the opportunity to meet them quite as often as we wanted to this year, given the kind of pandemic situation. And in terms of blended learning approach, we're working on digital workbooks for a lot of our units as well. So again, it's this whole idea of the children being on their own kind of learning journey, that you will have those who move on quicker than others do. And so we wanted to create these booklets so that the children could work on at their own pace, whether that be at home or in school, with support then from the teacher and that kind of face-to-face interaction. So we use Google Slides for this. Google Slides, you can basically add any kind of document into it. You can add videos, you can add pictures, you've got hyperlinks, you can put in your links to other websites and things outside. You can use GIFs and all the rest of it, and we're hoping that they'll be really successful. We used them a little bit over the last wee while, and the pupils do respond really well to them. So for example, you could have an assignment set, and for the children you want to stretch and challenge, you'll have maybe kind of like little video links that they could move on to. They could go and watch a little kind of extension task that they can do once they've completed the assignment. So I hope that some of that has been useful for you. And thank you very much for listening.
Super, thank you, Ashlene. Great range of tools there, both G Suite and beyond. So super, and lots of comments coming through based on what you've been sharing. And just to mention Google Sites again, Google Classroom may be sufficient for what you're wanting to do, but Google Sites, as Ashlene said, gives that extra control over the presentation of your content. And for some teachers, maybe using a lot of video, audio content, great to be able to kind of navigate pupils through that in a more structured way perhaps, and then maybe embed links to assignments alongside the content there. So great ideas, super, thank you so much. And we'll pass now over to Danielle, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle McKernan and I'm the Digital Learning Lead in St Patrick's Academy, Dungannon. Today I'm going to discuss two tools, Google Forms and Jamboard, both within G Suite, which I have found to be incredibly impactful for assessment and feedback. I use Google Forms mainly for formative assessment. They're quick and easy to set up, and in fact the pupils can even set them up themselves, and it is good to get the pupils to think about question construction. You can include a variety of questions, media. They're low-stake tests, and I use them as quick checkpoints along the road in their learning journey, and they assist pupils in reflecting on their own learning. Other ways I have used forms apart from quizzes is for starters, exit tickets, and forms are very effective for collecting information on prior knowledge. And also at the end of the lesson, an exit ticket can be created to get a snapshot for the pupils' learning. And this allows students as well to measure their own confidence against the learning outcome. Workbook then, so it shows you the quiz grade, which often the students are most interested in. And I just recently realized that actually if you set up the quiz assignment in Google Classroom, then you can get the quiz grade to automatically populate into your workbook. So with all of this combined information, their scores, their responses in the exit tickets, I can then use this to assist my planning for the next steps in the lesson and for implementing differentiated tasks. I've also found it useful to use a question from a previous topic in a Google form for retrieval practice and to assist with committing content to long-term memory. Another tool that has been useful is the inbuilt single question tool. So this is very useful for getting a quick idea for where the pupils are, and it's also been useful as a discussion thread where pupils can then respond to each other and help each other out. Google Forms is a very versatile tool. Pupils love the immediate feedback, and we as teachers like them because they're self-correcting. They can automate feedback. But as distance learning continued, I started to notice that some of the pupils seemed to be racing through the quiz to get it completed. And I had suspicions they just wanted to get it off their Google Classroom to-do list. So I had suspicions they weren't reading the automated feedback. And so this really worried me because I felt that in essence, I was creating a series of mini summative assessments because they weren't acting on the feedback. So I adapted my practice and I started to include some forms where they had to show me that they had actioned the feedback. So Dylan William, he says that feedback functions formatively only if the information fed back to the learner is used by the learner in improving their performance. So having reflected on this pedagogy, which I use in my own face-to-face classroom, I looked for opportunities within the Google form to put this pedagogy into practice. And this is where branching and validation features that exist within Google Forms became very useful. So the branching feature is right there beside where all your other question types are. And what you do is simply divide the linear form into sections, and then depending on the response, they're brought to a different section. So if they give an incorrect response, You use validation then instead of answer keys. And then on a separate note, validation, I must say, has been very useful for some of our other staff in the literacy subjects. So validation, they can use it to elicit longer style responses from the pupils. So instead of a pupil, for example, just writing in one single line, this validation control can be set to a minimal length, and then they're prompted to extend their response if it's under a certain number of letters. But back to the branching. So this ensures that feedback must be actioned in some way. They can't just move through the form, and it eliminates this click, click, click approach. So they have to answer correctly. And this has been very impactful in my classroom. It's resulted in more pupils sending me questions into the private comments about the question in the quiz they can't do because they can't get through the quiz, they can't finish the quiz until they answer it and take on the feedback. So this then opens up a learning dialogue on their problem area, and this never happened before with the self-correcting quizzes and the automatic feedback. So this for me has been a great improvement. It's really shifted the focus. So it moves the focus from marks to promoting metacognition. So students also availed of the question tool to ask their peer in the question for help, and this utilises what our classroom motto is of ask three before me. So taking this idea further, I then discovered digital escape rooms, and they have been really useful for gamification in the classroom. So there are loads of examples of these on YouTube, and my students just love doing them. They can work collaboratively to solve the clues, and they really enjoy being the very first person to declare that they have solved it and broke out of the escape room. So the way it works is they use locks, which are basically answers, and they have clues, which are questions. And again, they can't move on until they give the right answer. So the example shown here is a lock where the clue is one of the GCSE past paper questions for digital technology. In it, it requires them to fill in a term from a list of suggested words. So the pupils then enter the first letter of each word in a sequence to break out through the lock. And if you look online, you will even see some starter templates, so you can try it out. The second tool that has worked very well for me is Google Jamboard. And I started using Google Jamboard during synchronous instruction with Collaborate Ultra. And my first attempt at using Collaborate Ultra, I found I was lecturing to the class and I just couldn't get a feel for where they were in their learning. I'm so used to scanning the room, picking up on body language clues, and I just hadn't realised how much I depended on that. So I truly understood that feedback and interaction in a live lesson is essential. So I found the experience of not using any feedback tools to be quite soulless. In the classroom, we're a community of learners, especially in programme in which I teach. We're always asking each other for help. So I needed to find a tool that enabled me to emulate that environment, and Jamboard has been absolute gold for me in that respect. So what is Jamboard? Well, it's a digital whiteboard. You can use it collaboratively, just like Google Slides and Google Docs. It has an app and a desktop version, and unlike most programs, the app is actually more feature-rich than the desktop version. I've used this tool both synchronously and asynchronously, and I will discuss shortly how impactful this tool has been for me in synchronous discussion. So firstly, look at the features in case you aren't familiar with Jamboard. So it's really a series of whiteboard frames on which you use pen tools for writing, and usefully within the app version it has handwriting recognition assistance built in. There's sticky notes and images that can be added, and on the mobile phone version you can use the camera and they can take a photo of their work and then insert that directly into the frame. So in addition, documents from Google Drive can be added in, for example Google Slides, documents, PDF. Unfortunately not video. So a wee workaround that we've come up with for video is to just put the video link into a sticky note, and then we have to copy that text out and paste it into the browser. So here is an example lesson of where I used Collaborate Ultra and Jamboard. I'm sorry, there's a lot of text there, but I thought if you're looking back at these slides later, it might be handy to have these points there for you. So in Google Classroom, what you do is you let the pupils know about the Collaborative Ultra session link and also the Jamboard link in your announcement on Google Classroom. Then they all join in on the Jamboard. So it's a collaborative Jamboard, they're all in the same document. And then in advance, the task I wanted them to learn about is brought in from the Google Drive. So that's my prep in advance. I set up the slide with the learning material in there. And then we can just drag and drop it onto the frame. I used it in this lesson, firstly to model, then they did structure practice, and then after they went off and did some independent practice. So I modeled the question, and I used the Collaborative Ultra feedback, so you can see them down at the bottom of that slide there, to check their understanding as I went along. So I also made use of the polling tools to maintain engagement and to assess their confidence. After then I modelled the question, I then came to the most impactful part of the lesson, the supported practice, which I'll take you through on the next slide. And after the lesson, the students move on from supported practice to independent practice, and I was amazed at the improvement in their understanding. They were much further on at meeting the lesson's learning objectives than I anticipated, and I realised that feedback was the thing that made such a difference. So here is the supported practice part of the lesson. I was able to expand the top section of the frame and that the pupils were working on, and it's basically the equivalent of holding up those little mini whiteboards that we do in class, and this made such a difference. Now their thinking was visible. I could give live feedback, I could observe how they actioned the feedback, and I could use questioning, probing, I could move those along who looked stuck, and always encourage them to look across at the other pupils' frames to get hints. So they could look at somebody else's work and then make adjustments to their own. I encourage them to complete the tasks and verbalise their thinking. And sometimes students hearing it phrased in a different way from a peer can help them move forward. So as you can see, this moved the focus of the whole lesson to students. It's a very student-centred approach, and it really promotes metacognition. Additionally, I began using confidence measures whereby, while working on supported practice, in the bottom corner of each of the little slides at the top, you can see there's colours. So this let me see who needed assistance. So we colour code those, red, amber and green, so I can see at a glance where everyone is. So it ensures that everybody is engaged in the lesson. And then on the fourth little orange arrow across there, what you can see is the differentiated supports that I was able to build in as I went along. So the lesson is incredibly adaptable. So in this example, I helped them to figure out a starting point. So in this case, we were doing ER diagrams, ER modelling. So I helped them identify the entities, and once they identified the entities, they could then go off and do the next stage of the question. So this is an incredibly flexible tool. It allows you to adapt your instruction and be responsive to the learner's needs. So here are some further ideas for using Jamboard in the top left. So this is an example of where I firstly asked them to watch a video, and then as they watched the video, they had to think about the stages in this Scrum methodology, which is what this topic is on. So then what I did was I took little clips from the video into the Jamboard frame and then asked each person to take a stage and do a complete brain dump, basically. So each student took a separate section, and then when they had put everything down that they knew, then I asked them to look at somebody else's and to help fill in the gaps. Then we took, after they got their knowledge acquisition, then it was moving them on to higher order thinking skills. So I then moved on to use questioning techniques. We looked at the sequence, and I was able to ask them what would happen if, say, that stage was missing. What would be the impact? So this allowed me to really understand and assess their understanding, and it really helped me look at their depth of thought. Other examples you can see there, you can use it for labeling diagrams. It's really quick and easy to do that. You can put in some self-assessment activities. So you could, for example, give whole class feedback. You could then ask them to put their own work in, put the rubric in, and then they can mark on where they believe that they fit on the rubric, and they can make those judgments and then verbalize with you why they chose that mark. Incredibly useful as well are graphic organizers, so they can be quickly added within Jamboard. You can immediately add them. You just search within the Google Images directly in Jamboard, and you can pop them into your frame, make them the full size, and then collaboratively they can work together to fill up their graphic organizer. As well, at the very bottom, you can see the bottom right, there's a picture that from one of our Key Stage 3 history teachers, Karen McMullen. So she used it, for example, to pop in a poster, and they all then analysed around the poster and popped in their sticky notes around it for their ideas to interpret this poster. It can also be used for peer assessment in this way, where they can comment on each other's work and give suggestions. So thank you very much for listening. And if you decide to give escape rooms or Jamboard a go, I would really love to hear from you. And you're very welcome to contact me at the Academy, or you can contact me on Twitter. It's at Academy Danielle, although I suppose I'm not very active on Twitter, but I hope to start to use it much more now. Thank you.
Super fab. Danielle, great. And our presenters, I think, will be available to pick up more questions as we sort of move towards the end of today. If I could just share with you a link to a little takeaway sheet with links to today's slides and a lot of other content as well. I'll just try to bring it up here also on screen. So you can see here some of the documents that have been referred to, some materials provided kindly by Alistair, and the curriculum documents from the department, etc. So hopefully that will be of use to you. We'll add further to that based perhaps on some of the further videos and content that was mentioned by the presenters during the session.